Hey friends, welcome back to Channeling Chinez, and welcome to the second podcast installment of Degrassi couples and what kind of soul connection and relationship each couple is categorized as. But before we get into all of that, don't forget to subscribe to Channeling Chinez. On this platform, we do podcasts, breakdown videos, as well as tarot readings on Fridays. You can also connect with me at Official Chinez on Instagram and TikTok. You can book a tarot reading with me at my website, which is linked below. And you can also browse my products like my feminine journal at the link below as well. And before we get into this video, please check out this message. Please also be reminded that any celebrities or public figures used in the depiction of these concepts are for entertainment purposes only. Please help me in keeping everyone safe online as we use these videos to heal and build our individual and collective consciousness. So karmic lessons is an interesting category because yes, these relationships are karmic, but it's only these two souls who could teach each other these lessons because they had something that the other one needed or vice versa. So we're just going to jump right into that so you can see exactly what I mean. The first one that I have on my list is Jane and Declan. The reason why this was a karmic lesson for particularly Jane, and it could really only be Declan that she could learn this lesson through, is because Jane at that time was feeling undesirable. She was really feeling like her femininity was being diminished in her relationship with Spinner. She kind of felt like a guy friend. And for this sort of hot, this is how they frame Declan, right? As this like hot, rich guy to have this attraction for a girl who's a little bit more masculine or a little bit more, just a little less feminine forward, for Jane was pivotal for her to realize that she had more to offer than just being one of the guys. Did she do it in the most shady, inappropriate way? Absolutely. But that's why it becomes a karmic lesson, because it's always something that happens where it clicks something or a lesson in the other person's mind for them to view or see themselves or see the possibility of their lives in a different way. One of the next relationships we have on the list is Drew and Katie. And this was a karmic lesson on both sides. Drew was just coming out of a traumatic situation with getting beat up by the gang, and Katie was able to give him strength and learn how to utilize his passion for wanting to do like martial arts and fighting and sort of direct that energy in a way that was more positive. But at the same time, Drew became a karmic lesson for Katie. Katie, fresh out of coming out of rehab and sort of being taken down a peg from this being this type A personality, she had to learn what forcing outcomes can get you. And I don't even know if that's what she ended up taking away, but that's what I took from it. They sort of wanted to believe that she took her power back when she exposed the fact that her and Drew had hooked up, which means he had effectively cheated on Bianca with Katie, which he had done vice versa. So it was just a get back. But really, it was the fact that when Katie forced outcomes, only bad things happened. When she tried to force the outcome of the soccer team, she ended up, addicted to substances. When she tried to force this relationship with Drew, seeing that he still wasn't really over Bianca, she ended up losing Drew to Bianca anyway. Then when she tried to force the truth to come out, she ended up losing her presidency. So it's one of those situations where both parties had the ability and had the other thing that the other person needed to actually learn the lesson to take themselves to that next level. The next relationship, Liberty and Damien. Now, this one is an interesting one because for Liberty, she needed to realize that it was okay for her to have fun again after the loss of JT, her baby daddy. And it was also okay for her to realize that she was desirable and that it was okay for her to be wanted. Because Liberty was always like the dorky friend of Manny, who's like the super hot girl, and Emma, who is always in a relationship and who all the guys want. And so for a guy that is dating Emma to want her, it was really almost like her finally realizing her worth. Whereas for Damien, it's like, if you was bored with Emma, you could have just said that. You could have said that and stopped wasting everybody's time. The next relationship on the list is Emma and Kelly. Emma is the quintessential wounded feminine. She's extremely codependent and controlling and emotionally manipulative. And she ends up in this relationship with Kelly, who's her roommate. And it comes to a screeching halt when she comes back to Degrassi to sort of show her progress with this non-profit organization, because of course Emma would be doing a non-profit, and everything just sort of falls apart because Emma has no clue who she is, and she just tries to find herself in relationships. And that's why the fact that she marries Spinner is not a surprise. So you'll be interested to see where their relationship falls on this list. The next relationship on the list is Paige and Mr. Oleander. Very inappropriate. This was a karmic lesson for Paige as well, about why you don't force things, about why you don't put certain people on a pedestal because they will throw you under the bus to save themselves, especially someone who would be engaging in a relationship with a minor when they know that they are instructing that minor. It's very obviously someone who's going to abuse their power. So I don't really know what the karmic lesson for Mr. Oleander was, other than the fact that he completely lost his way after engaging in that relationship and dissolved into a shell of himself, as he deserved. The next relationship is Toby and Spinner's sister. I'm so sorry, I forget what Spinner's sister's name is, but Toby, he needed to learn to assert himself, to stop being scary, to step up and stop letting people walk all over him, because Toby has one of the hardest times in high school that I've ever seen a TV character to have. And Spinner's sister also needed to set boundaries with her brother about the fact that it's okay for her to have romantic interests and for people to like her. The next relationship, we have Peter and Mia. This is another karmic lesson, a big one for Peter, because you can't just jump into a relationship when you're not over the one that you were in before. He was never over Darcy before he started dating Mia. Mia was just trying to find a man so bad, and she eventually realized that she needed to focus on her career because her obsession with her relationships wasn't doing anything to push her forward when she had that raw talent that was eventually going to push her forward, which we know was to go on and be a vampire. But for Peter, he had to learn to stop being the rebound and to stop being, the secret boo, or just like, he just sort of had this karmic cycle of being a partner that ends up being discarded for something that he said or did, but he never really, or like something that really happens in their life that has nothing to do with him. But because of the way he positions himself in these relationships, he ends up taking everything so personally, because he also doesn't have a personal identity other than being this like rich kid who's kind of slippery, who gets to hook up with all the girls. So it's just that persona ended up coming back to bite when all of these women ended up growing or moving beyond him and moving beyond the facade that was Peter. The next relationship on the list is one of my most disliked relationships in Degrassi history, because I don't understand why we accepted a young girl being coerced into a relationship with someone, because Anya and Owen is such a karmic, toxic lesson for both sides. I mean, Owen, when I say that Owen coerced her, he literally, his way of picking her up was saying, "You're not too good for me." What? What do you mean? Like, why would that be a reason why somebody should date you? Because you can convince them that you and them are on the same level, or that they're beneath you. But what is crazy is, for Owen, he put Anya on a pedestal and had absolutely no idea who she was. And his karma was finding out that neither did she. She had no idea who she was. She had no idea who she wanted. She's another wounded feminine who lost herself in relationships with men. And she had to really, really come to this dark place for her to realize that she had to figure out what she was going to do for herself. And then what's interesting is he ends up being the one to train her, to enter the army or whatever the case may be is. And it's really only Owen who could have done that for her. Like, Sav couldn't have done that for her. The doctor that she was trying to date wasn't going to do that for her. It only could have really been Owen in this scenario who had the emotional disconnectedness to be able to yell and scream at her that way to sort of push her, but who also still saw her greatness and believed in it. Because even though it was unhealthy the way that he put her on a pedestal, it was because he saw greatness in her. The issue was, you can't force someone to date you. You can't harass someone into dating you. You can't prey on someone in a vulnerable state so that they will date you. And then you can't get mad when you find out that that person is, a human being who is flawed. I will just go on the record and saying Owen is trash. And that's it. The next karmic relationship is Fiona and Adam. What's frustrating about this relationship is it was really unnecessary. Adam really didn't need to have Fiona's substance abuse projected onto him. He was already going through enough. And because he wanted so badly to be loved by a girl and to be seen as a desirable male partner, with Adam being trans, he was willing to, enable Fiona and her substance abuse. And Fiona had to realize that she was abusing substances, not only because she had just been in an abusive relationship, but because she was suppressing her actual sexuality. So that's one of those karmic connections that it had to happen between these two individuals because of simply of who they were, because Adam was a trans guy, and that created, it scratched the warped perception Fiona had of her own sexuality. And then it also scratched Adam's dissonance with being able to show up masculine with a feminine body. So it was definitely one of those had to be them two relationships. The next one, Drew and Allie. Okay, so Drew and Allie, and what's interesting about the two of them is this is the reason why they were able to be friendly and really not have beef overall toward the rest of their high school experience, despite the fact that they dated and they had a lot of dramatic things happen. Because for Drew and Allie was the right person to challenge Drew in all of the areas that he was neglecting. The fact that he allows his mother to run his life, the fact that he neglects his education or he avoids being challenged scholastically, and the fact that he's not good in relationships and that he's not a faithful person. But at the same time, for Allie, Drew was the perfect person to burst her bubble about having a perfect relationship, about getting with the hottest guy, and about realizing that those things don't really mean anything if A, you're not being recognized and treated properly, and B, you're not being embraced for your intelligence and you're not being embraced for who you truly are. Drew was very intimidated by Allie, and he felt small in her presence instead of feeling uplifted by her trying to help. But at the same time, Allie had to realize that you cannot overreach and do people's homework in order for them to be that perfect relationship that you need for them to be. But we are almost through with the karmic lessons list. And I knew this series was going to be long. I assumed it may be like 2 parts, but at this rate, with the rest of the categories that I have to get through, it may be a 3-part video series, but they will all come out consecutively. So the next karmic lesson we have is Jake and Katie. I mean, Katie, this is a very simple karmic lesson. Katie squandered a perfectly good relationship because she was too hyper focused. It's not that it was bad that she was focused on her goals. It was the fact that she was willing to throw away her morals for material gain when she didn't have to do that. She could have found some other ways, which she eventually does, in order for her to go to Stanford. She didn't have to do, side work in Vegas behind her boyfriend's back. But at the same time, I felt like Jake really needed to be put in his place about other people's goals and aspirations. Some people did want to go to college, Jake. Some people did want other things. It's not for you to decide what should be important for your partner. And Katie wasn't going to be that kind of person to back down and let somebody else tell her what she should value. Even though it was a relationship that she never really had to, cause that level of harm to. So that's sort of how the lessons are learned on both sides. Next on the list, we have Claire and KC. They were so young, but Claire needed to learn how to speak up. If she likes someone, say that. If you don't, say that. If you're being disrespected in your relationship, say that. Like, you have to vocalize what is happening, and you can't just allow these things to happen to you. And Casey's karmic lesson was building from Claire. And it's really about his inability to be honest in many respects, and how he doesn't take accountability for his own actions. The next karmic relationship was Frankie and Winston, and also Frankie and Jonah. I'm going to do these both at the same time because Frankie, very, very much wounded feminine, very much codependent. But the issue with Winston is, at the end of the day, Winston had absolutely no excuse for kissing her quote unquote best friend. Honestly, there was no need to take him back after that. At the end of the day, he did get up there and make jokes at her expense because he wanted to be funny. And you could have made jokes at Miles' expense. You could have made jokes at the expense of Zig and Tiny, and the people who were actually clowning on you. You got up there and made jokes about the only person who actually supported you, and then ended up supporting your play just for you to kiss her friend? Please. She needed to learn that she deserved better, and she eventually did. But then she pivoted to a relationship with Jonah where she was basically gaslit the entire time until she was pushed to the point that she came off as crazy because of how much Jonah sat there and gaslit her about the fact that he was, in fact, hiding certain things and wasn't being forthcoming in their relationship about how he truly felt and what he truly thought. The next spiritual relationship category on our Degrassi couples list is the soul tie or karmic contract. So the last lesson that we did before this was the karmic lesson, and that was described as a particular lesson that happens between two souls, that those two souls decided to teach each other, right? You have the lesson and then you move on. But when you have a karmic contract or a soul tie, this is one of those potentially extended lessons where if you don't learn from this connection, the first time, you'll be tested multiple times with this person. There's a lot of back and forth. This kind of connection can sometimes mirror or reflect certain things that happen between twin flames. But what makes it different is these two soul vibrations are both growing and rising. They're not the exact same like in twin flames, but they're also in a low vibrational place. They're both in the same sort of low vibrational place. And the fact that they're connecting could either actually have permanent damages on their life or could ultimately affect their timelines. So these are those really deep relationships that happen where you're not soulmates in the sense that there is a sense of peace or calm in this relationship. There's always like a sense of anxiety or this energy of trying to force something that isn't supposed to work, that isn't meant to work. two people who are coming from two different worlds, or two people who have the same dark issues, or two people that are just very toxic for each other because they feed into each other's issues. But again, it's a contract. So if you don't eventually break the contract, this particular relationship cycle could potentially never end, or be extended for longer than it needed to be. So let's jump right in. The first relationship that I have on this list is Paige and Alex. Now, a lot of people love this relationship. They love how obsessed Alex secretly was with Paige, and they love how the relationship opened Paige up, made Paige seem more human. But there was a toxic element in this relationship, in that Alex always felt like she wasn't a good enough person in general, not just because of Paige, but because of her upbringing, because of where she came from, because of the kind of things that she would have to deal with when she went home. And the fact that she ended up having this relationship with the most popular type A, well-to-do girl, and they had this passionate connection, was difficult for Alex to accept the fact that she could be happy and deserving of that kind of relationship. But this was all about Alex's issue with her own self-worth, whereas Paige had a very set view of herself and of who she was, and she had been humbled on many different occasions regarding that. But nothing was, well, there were a lot of things that were probably traumatic and humbling for Paige that was terrible for her to experience. But this particular relationship with Alex, it really humbled Paige, because she had to sort of bow down to her own ego of Paige Michalchuk and what that means to be her. It means being popular. It means having a hot boyfriend. It doesn't mean being in a relationship with another girl. She had a sibling that was already out of the closet, and she felt like they had specific roles. So Paige was very humbled in this relationship about roles and about people fitting into certain boxes. And the thing about it that was toxic is, as much as she called Alex up to greatness, she also would put her back in the box when it was convenient, or when she felt like she needed an ego boost. This is why the relationship ended up being toxic and ended up being hurtful for Alex in the long run, as well as Paige, because Alex went into it with a fragile ego because she has low self-worth. Paige went into it with an inflated ego, and then sometimes will take things out on Alex in order to support that inflated ego. So as you can see, it's one of those it's when your wounds perfectly match in the most toxic way possible. And in order for you to actually grow, you need to sort of let this relationship go. But this is different from a twin flame relationship, because while this does develop you spiritually, there isn't that deep spiritual soul connection, because you are not the same soul. And there isn't necessarily, I mean, there can be, anything is possible, but there isn't necessarily that timeline where two individuals could be at a different place where they both have experienced growth and come together in a harmonious union. This is that contract where it needs to be broken, and that is what the purpose of this relationship is. So that should give you some great examples as we get through this list. When we come to our next connection with Spinner and Jane, this is another one of those relationships that I'm sure many people thought that they were going to be soulmates, but they're not. They definitely had a lot in common. They were definitely a security blanket for each person, but they were ultimately a hindrance at the end of the day. And they served a purpose when they needed to. Like, Spinner was there for Jane when she was unpacking dark childhood trauma, but Spinner didn't have the capacity to grow with Jane because Spinner was resistant to growth. And we see that theme pop up in other relationships for Spinner, whereas Jane had issues with her femininity and she felt safe presenting more masculine because she felt like that kept her safe. And so Spinner reinforced that, but then there were other instances where she felt like that diminished her femininity, and she was unable to feel fully seen by Spinner. But because it's such a comfortable connection, it's hard for this particular contract to be broken without something drastic happening, such as Jane completely cheating on Spinner. Because a lot of times when souls are at this low vibration, they don't want to release the comfort. They don't want to let go of the comfort of the relationship in order to have the necessary growth that they're supposed to have. The next relationship on the list is Emma and Peter. Woo, this particular contract is kind of messed up because it actually didn't really have a lot to do with them, and it had a lot more to do with their parents and a lot more to do with the fact that their souls are the kinds of ones that chose to have this experience together, to see their parents sort of have this affair, and for what that did to Emma as far as her fear in relationships and the fact that she is extremely codependent. She is extremely lover girl driven, but, has expectations that a lot of people may not live up, not that they're wrong, but that she is going to be let down in her life by people, including Peter, who ends up letting her down when he turns on Sean. But that's kind of a convoluted situation. And for Peter, it was definitely something that he had to go through to see his mother in a different light. He always had this very strained relationship with his mother because he was imperfect and she was, more, I guess, well-behaving than he was. He sort of erred on the side of his father being reckless, and then he saw his mother being reckless with Emma's dad. So it's one of those soul contracts that the two of them are like, okay, we have to address like these toxic elements that we've been exposed to by our parents. And we also are going to address them by playing those out with each other, because they were both eventually toxic with each other. Whether they thought that Peter was like getting away with a crime, like that's toxic. The fact that you thought that he was abusing his power and she was with it for a second and then she wasn't, when it came to, between her and Sean, it was just very strange. And not only that, like, Emma, you're in this relationship with this person who exploited your quote unquote best friend. And that says a lot more about how you feel about your friend than it does about this relationship. So they both had to address a lot of toxicity within themselves and within their generational line. The next relationship on this karmic soul tie list is Darcy and Spinner. So Spinner has a lot of karmic relationships because, again, he is one of those really codependent souls who uses relationships to define who he is and what he should do or who he's supposed to be. And eventually he does realize who he is, and there is this realization that he doesn't have a desire really to grow past. And not that you have to leave your hometown. You don't have to leave. You don't have to go anywhere. But for Spinner was closed-minded. Like, for you to discourage your high school girlfriend, Jane, who I'm speaking about briefly, to go to the college of her dreams because she's just supposed to stay with you, like, is absurd. It's absurd. It's very small-minded. And that is Spinner's humble beginnings, is that he's just very impressionable and very easily molded. This is why this contract and his relationship with him and Darcy was particularly triggering, because not only did Darcy serve to bring spirituality into his life after one of the darkest periods of his life, causing his best friend to be harmed and, a kid that he bullied to ultimately be unalived. Darcy was sort of this symbol of purity, and he projected that onto her and she assumed that role. But the truth is, Darcy really wasn't fully that girl. She did want to be desired more than she let on. Then she had a traumatic, no, I'm jumping ahead in the story. No, because she definitely was on MySpace, whatever they were calling it, posting risque photos and doing the opposite of this angelic, pure girl that Spinner slated her as, and that who she was supposed to be, who she was raised to be in the same household as Claire, as these hyper spiritual Christian girls who are very pure and abstinence rings and all of that. The two of them totally subverted their point of view of a partner as well as the point of view of themselves. And so this was definitely a contract that needed to be broken in order for Spinner to start to develop his own sense of spirituality within himself and not as a projection of a relationship, and for Darcy to start owning who she was instead of who she felt like she should have been. The next relationship on the list is definitely in my top 5 least favorite relationships. We can add this to the list with Anya and Owen. But the next relationship, the next karmic soul tie, is Craig and Ashley. Man, Craig is going to pop up on this list a couple of times. I'm just going to let y'all know, because Craig has a lot of low vibrational energy tied up in him. He has seen a lot of violence in his life, and he's been through a lot. And that has to do with, the chemical imbalances that he goes through. But at the very same time, he's personally toxic because he does not take accountability for things. And he's codependent. And you're going to keep seeing those themes pop up. But in this relationship with Ashley, this is that Cancer Capricorn toxic relationship. Like, a lot of people feel like Cancer and Capricorn relationships are the perfect match, and they can be. They're divine opposites, right? I've seen beautiful Cancer Capricorn relationships, but in this particular instance, when the Cancer, which is Craig, is very underdeveloped and they don't really have a good sense of self. Like, they have an inflated image of their self, but they still need to be validated by external means and other people. They get a Capricorn energy like Ashley, which I did Degrassi zodiac signs on TikTok probably like a couple years ago, and I don't remember what I gave Ashley. I don't know if I said that she was a Pisces or a Capricorn, but she's one of the two. But she gives me Capricorn, very controlling type vibes, but also like secretly manipulative emotionally so that she can get certain outcomes out of Craig. And don't let the Cancer in the relationship actually mess up and cheat like Craig did. All bets are off. The Capricorn now has all of the ammo in her arsenal to take things out on that partner for the rest of the relationship, because she can always refer back to, well, you cheated on me with Manny. It's just a control tactic, and Craig is just one of those vulnerable male Cancer water sign energy that is very susceptible to this kind of toxic relationship. So the two of them needed to break up, or else it was going to go on forever, because Craig is very low vibrational. He's very low vibrational. Like, he really needed to evolve, and we see him sort of evolve when he ends up, going to Hollywood or whatever it is he did, and he was at Coachella and he comes back and blah, blah, blah. We see him looking more stable. But even before that, he was still like on one, which is why he's the next relationship on this category with him and Manny, who also have a nasty little soul tie. If Craig is this water sign, Manny is definitely this fiery energy, and it's like fire and ice. Like, they have a very difficult time resisting each other because they are what the other person wants. Manny wants this emotional guy that is somehow strong but is somehow protective, and Craig really wants the hot girl who's obsessed with him, right? So the two of them play those roles really, really well. But because Craig can also be manipulative in his own right, he had the power to really twist things in his relationship with Manny to sort of make her feel crazy about what was going on, especially when he was abusing substances. And so this is the kind of relationship where Manny had to realize her own truth and take that truth with her, even if it meant losing the love that she wanted, and Craig needed to be called out. The next soul tie karmic contract relationship on the list is Sav and Anya. This is another one where I think that y'all probably thought they were going to be soulmates. And they could have been if their relationship wasn't mostly toxic. Like, in the beginning, they bonded over stickers and little cute stuff, but it's the fact that this relationship was so emotionally tumultuous for both people. It gives it a karmic soul tie energy where the two of you are emotionally enmeshed in the idea of this relationship and you both can't let it go. And the lesson is just that. You cannot be so emotionally enmeshed within a connection that you can't release it when you realize that it's not benefiting either person. Sav had to have this relationship because he was always going to be confronted with the fact that his culture may dictate who he gets to date. Anya was so willing to become whatever to be in a relationship. She had to be in that kind of connection where it was like, no matter what you do, this family is not going to accept you. You see how it's like it had to be that other person in order for these both parties to learn the lesson. Sav and Anya are like the perfect example of that. Moving right along, we have Drew and Claire. And what's really irritating to me about the relationship between Drew and Claire is that it could have been cute. It could have been cute. They ruined it with the whole pregnancy bit. I know that pregnancy is a Degrassi staple, but we had done it so many times. And even in Claire's small friend group with her, Jenna, and Allie, they all went through some sort of pregnancy or pregnancy scare. Like, it doesn't have to sweep through the friend group like that. So I just felt like it was so unnecessary for Claire to go through this. It was much more compelling, the relationship between her and Drew and how they both served to teach themselves or each other a deep lesson in not only perception, right? Because Claire had a perception of herself and a perception of Drew, right? Drew had a perception of himself, and he also had a perception of how he felt Claire probably viewed him, and then was surprised when he realized that she had a different point of view. Like, she wasn't going to magically be in love with him because they shared a kiss, because she's somehow this nerdy girl, and that's what nerdy girls do when a hot guy shows them attention. Claire had thoughts, opinions, beliefs. Like, you weren't going to just win her over because you have a nice tan and dark hair. And Claire also had to switch her perspective of those kind of people. She assumed that the popular hot guy didn't have depth, couldn't make her laugh, and not only that, wouldn't be interested in someone like her. And so that is why it had to be the two of them to sort of, fall for each other and really expand each other's perception of other people. And I think that it's one of those relationships that really could have opened Drew up to actually finding a quality partner down the line, because he wasn't looking at relationships through a superficial lens anymore. And obviously Claire was going to go back to Eli, but we'll get to that. The next relationship on the list is Allie and Leo. This was very toxic. Obviously, Leo was very abusive, and Allie thought that once again she had her dream relationship and didn't want to let her dream go. We saw how that worked out. We don't need to spend too much time on that. The next relationship we have is Miles and Maya. So this is an interesting tie, and it's particularly because of Maya's previous relationship with Cam, which also appears on this list. So I'm going to talk about those kind of together. because Maya and Cam had an anxiety-filled relationship, which is another telltale sign of karmic energy and a potential soul tie when it's a restless connection and neither party can sort of settle and feel safe in the connection. Maya and Cam really struggled with that. Maya with the fact that it was her first relationship and she didn't know what to expect, and Cam because he was emotionally suffering, period. And we saw Cam come to his sad demise because of his emotional suffering. So when we jump to her relationship with Miles and she starts engaging with someone who's emotionally unpredictable, there's no wonder why she started to lose it and break down when Miles did something mildly unpredictable or gravely unpredictable. Miles also never really had to answer for the fact that his actions affected the people around him. He was so used to being the scapegoat and being blamed in his family for things. He kind of threw his hands up and was like, you know what, I'm always going to be the bad guy, so I don't care. But what he didn't realize is you're sometimes the bad guy to people who didn't do anything to you, like Maya or Tristan for that matter. And it's one thing for you to be the scapegoat in your family and be totally in the right to fight for yourself and to want to be seen for what's true in your family and not the lies that everybody agrees to in his family. But it's another thing to just be the bad guy to people who aren't harming you and for the people who are trying to help you, like Maya. So Maya is kind of the only character that really could have taught him that on a deep level because of her past experience in relationships with a partner whose emotional unpredictability actually ended very gravely, but because of her emotional intelligence having gone through those experiences. What people don't realize is Maya not only went through that experience with Cam, she watched her older sister, who she always looked up to, who was always, strong and forthcoming and headstrong, suffer with substance abuse that almost took her out as well. And this is her freshman year. So she's 14. When you really think about it, Maya went through a lot her freshman year. So when she eventually breaks down along the line by the time she's a junior, it's very, very understandable. But this relationship with Miles was super triggering for her for those reasons. The next relationship that we have on the list is Zig and Esme. Lord. Zig is the Craig of next class, and Zig is one of those water signs that ends up in a relationship with someone who's toxically controlling, overbearing, and emotionally manipulative. So whatever I said for Craig and Ashley could easily apply for Zig and Esme. The only difference is Esme's issues were deeper than Ashley's. Ashley was just mildly narcissistic and self-serving, right? Esme is so hurt that she thinks when other people are hurt, it's funny. Esme is so hurt that she thinks that people can be used as objects in order to further her agenda. She's just as much as a narcissist as any other, but it's what motivates her to harm others that makes Esme very threatening and an unsafe person to be around. So the reason why this is a particular soul tie for Zig is because Zig has a tendency in his codependent nature and in his relationship to try and save, and to overlook the truth of the matter because he's being satiated, because it's feeding his ego, because he gets to engage sensually, if you know what I mean. He has to realize that the sensation of an experience doesn't negate the seriousness of it. And he learned that lesson with Tiny and the whole gang thing. When Tiny got hurt and harmed, he realized that it's one thing to puff your chest out and live this thug life, and it's another thing to really be in it. He learned that another time when he was pushing things out of his parents' convenience store, and then he ended up getting kicked out. It's one thing for you to do these behaviors and act like this, but it's a completely different thing for there to be consequences, and there will be consequences. And he didn't want to accept that there would be consequences for him based on Esme's actions, her behavior, and his connection to her. Very deep lesson for the both of them. We have a couple more on this list. We have the last two. Next relationship we have on this list is Craig and Ellie. This is another one of those relationships that could have given twin flame back and forth if Craig remotely showed any interest in Ellie in the beginning. Craig dismissed Ellie most of the season, and Ellie was just throwing herself at Craig over and over and over and over and over again. And Craig was overlooking what could have been a very equal, balanced relationship, because Craig wasn't looking for something balanced. He was looking for something fast, quick, fun, that supported his ego, that supported what he wanted, his dreams. He wasn't concerned with what could actually help him grow and expand as an individual. And Ellie refused to see her own worth if Craig didn't see it. You know what I mean? So like, if Craig didn't think that she looked pretty because he was looking at Manny, then oh my gosh, and I must not look pretty. Like, Ellie needed to find Ellie, and Craig needed to get out of his own way. And so the two of them sort of struggled. She ended up enabling Craig because she was too busy trying to get picked by Craig to see that he was also manipulating her. And then even when they get to the special, she meets up with Craig. Craig is in a whole relationship with a model, or whatever the case may be is. He cheats on the model with Ellie, doing the same thing he had been doing since high school. Ellie was supposed to trigger his growth, but because she was so desperate to be wanted and needed by Craig, she would evade her growth in order to appease him, and then they would end up separating anyway. The last relationship on this list is Eli and Imogen. Okay, this will also take a spot in the top 5 worst relationships in Degrassi history, because Imogen was giving Esme energy. Like, I can see how they created Esme's character because of what they did with Imogen. When it comes to this like emotionally disturbed girl, because she's been through things in her past. Imogen didn't go through what Esme went through with losing her mother. She lost her mother, but her mother wasn't even her maternal connection. Her father was her nurturer and her maternal connection. Imogen's mother was her masculine connection. Either way, she still felt abandoned by her mother in the same way that Esme felt abandoned by her mother because her mother chose to unalive herself. So both Imogen and Esme have that emotional manipulation element where they know how easily people are triggered by their emotions. But Imogen was so toxic in her relationship with Eli because he was clearly struggling coming to terms with his mental health. And she actually thought that that was going to be the best tool for her to use in order to win favor in his eyes so that he would want to date her. What makes you think coming in between what someone is trying to do to stabilize their mental health what makes you think that that's going to make this person desire you? It's very twisted, but most karmic contracts and soul ties are. If you've enjoyed this series so far, stick around. We still have more to get to as we continue the breakdown of Degrassi couples for karmics, soulmates, and twin flames. My name's Chinez, and I will see you in the next episode.